Chris here at the Handle It Warehouse. You just received your Model 800 stretch wrapper, and I know you're excited to open it up and start using it, but there's a couple things we need to take care of before you sign any of the freight paperwork. As you can see, it arrives in this massive box on this oversized pallet. If the unit arrives and this box is missing and it's on the pallet still, or if there's any huge dents or just the box looks kind of mangled, there's a good chance there could be some freight damage. So you definitely want to then inspect the machine before you sign any freight paperwork. As we begin our inspection, the first thing you want to look at is cosmetic damage. So if there was a chip in the turntable or a chip on the mast or anything like that with paint scrubbed or anything off, I wouldn't refuse it for anything like that, because we have touch-up paint. We can send that over to you and get it taken care of. As we look at the sensors, we're going to start at the top, work our way down. We have a proximity sensor here. Everything looks good there. Then we have, this particular unit has an integrated scale, so we have a scale indicator here. And everything looks good, intact there. And then working our way down, we have this motor. Everything looks good, and there's a fan cover here. That fan cover is not dented or anything. If it were, it can easily be replaced. We can send you a replacement. Looking over here, we have the photo eye. Photo eye looks intact. Then we have the rollers. Everything looks straight and intact there. And then we have another limit switch here. So last thing we have here is this safety pan. So when you notice, first looking at it, it looks like, oh, something's wrong with it. It's not tightened up. This is by design. So don't go and try and tighten these up right away. Everything is fine here. I'll explain later how that works, but for right now, everything looks good. So we did our inspection, everything looks great. The next thing we're gonna do is remove this box and remove all these packaging materials. Our Model 800 and 850 have an option for an integrated scale so that you can weigh the pallet on the unit when you're done wrapping it. This particular unit has that integrated scale option, and you can tell that because it has this cradle you can see underneath the turntable. So if you didn't have that at all, you wouldn't have to worry about this next part. But if you have that, you want to inspect the leveling feet. So right underneath here, you can see this leveling foot. Just make sure it's intact and that there's one here and there should be one on the opposite end and then two on the back. You're gonna have 4 total. Just check all 4, make sure they're there and that they're intact. The next thing we're gonna do is tip up the mast, but before that, we want to locate the bolts to secure it. Typically, they'll be over here with the manual. You can see the bolts here. And then also, because we have the integrated scale, we have the plug-in for the indicator for that. The next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna have Cody tip up the mast, and when he tips it up, I'm gonna secure it into place with these bolts using a 6 and 8 millimeter Allen wrench. So as he's lifting it up, I wanna make sure that these cables don't get pinched at all. So they're looking good here. Important that you make sure they don't get pinched in there. Sometimes when you tip the mast up, the holes don't always line up exact. And the reason that is because this is on a hinge. So what you want to do is you want to actually loosen this hinge up on both sides a little bit. That way you're able to move the mast around and line it up exact. And then once you do that, then you tighten up the hinge. Now that we have the hinge loose, we have more play on this, and I can move it around so I can get everything lined up exact. Now that we have the unit in place, we want to get some power to it. The good news is that this is just a 110 plug-in. A couple general rules of thumb about the power requirements. You want to have a dedicated circuit for this. You really don't want to use extension cords at all. And another rule, you don't want to plug into a GFI outlet, because if you do that, it's going to trip the breaker. Also on this unit, we do have the integrated scale, so we have another plug-in. It's going to go right here for the indicator. So this comes with it. This plugs up here, and then this plugs into a 110 outlet. This one, you don't have to have a dedicated outlet. You could use extension cords because it's really not much of a power requirement. Now we're going to plug it in. Now that we have the wrapper plugged in, we can power on the unit. In order to turn the unit on, you just turn this knob to the right, give it a second to boot up. Notice it's going to be blinking reset here. Whenever you turn on the machine, it's going to ask you to reset. So you just click that. And what that does, it'll bring everything, the turntable and the carriage to the home position. They're already at the home position, so give it a second. It'll beep letting you know that it's good. You just heard that. And we're good to go as far as that goes. Now what I want to do, I just want to go into manual mode and raise this carriage up to chest level, because I want to show you guys a couple of sensors and things on here just to point them out and show you how they work and what they're there for. All right, so we're on the back side of the machine here. I want to point out a couple of limit switches. So there's an upper limit switch here, and down in the bottom, same thing, bottom limit switch. What happens is as this carriage goes up, if it goes too far, it's going to tell it to stop. So as it's raising up, hits that switch. Even though I'm hitting up, it stopped because it's saying I can't go any higher. So on the very bottom, we have the same thing. So you always want to make sure that these aren't busted off or out of alignment or anything, because if they're out of alignment, it'll go up too high. Now on the bottom, we have the lower limit switch here, which does the same thing at the bottom. So as it hits that, it stops the unit. Another thing I want to point out on the back of this unit is this fan cover. Sometimes this gets hit or damaged and it's dented in and it's hitting this fan, and its fan's making a clicking noise, so people kind of freak out and think there's something really wrong with it. Really all it is this hitting the fan, and you can either undent it or you could get a new fan cover. They're very inexpensive. On the front of the carriage here, we have the photo eye, which you can see right now there's nothing in front of it, so it's showing green. If there were a pallet in front of it, it would go orange. So if I put my hand here, it's reading my hand, so it's reading there's basically a pallet in front of it. So it's going to look like that as it's raising up. Once it gets above the pallet, it's going to go to green, and it's going to stop knowing that it's at the top of the pallet. Another thing to note, on the very top of here, there's a sensitivity adjustment. So depending on your lighting, sometimes you want either more sensitive photo eye or less sensitive, so you can adjust it right there. The last thing I want to point out is this safety pin and limit switch. So notice this is very loose. I mentioned this earlier. This is by design. So you don't want to tighten this up, because if you tighten it up, it's going to engage this limit switch. And if that gets engaged, it thinks it's hitting something, and it's going to stop and go back up, and you're getting an error code of SIC. So if you get that code, sometimes you're not sure what's going on. You might notice that this is pinched up or something's causing this to stay up. The most common thing is people tighten the bolts because they think that it's supposed to be tightened. So I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to put my hand right here, and you'll see it'll make it go back up. I'm getting an error code. I'm going to have to reset it. You've taken the first steps of receiving, inspecting, putting the unit in place, and powering it up. We have more videos that you can watch, such as loading the film, how to install pallet jack ramps, and how to use all the functions of your Handle It Model 800. Thank you again for choosing Handle It for your stretch wrapper needs.